Everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and our Unported playlist series. Today, clearly, we're taking a look at Daytona 2, released in 1998 by Sega on the Model 3 arcade platform, and it is a direct sequel to Daytona USA that came out on the Model 2 and then was ported over to the Sega Saturn. Again, it's another one of those games that makes absolutely no sense why Sega didn't bring this home to the Dreamcast, because everybody loved Daytona USA on the Saturn and in arcades, and this game was also a huge hit for Sega. Interestingly enough, apparently you could have 16 of these cabinets networked together at once for 16-person races. Now, I've never seen that in the US. I remember seeing this cabinet with one next to it as a two-player setup, but I'm sure somewhere in Japan, Sega went nuts and networked all 16 of these machines together at once to be able to play. But you're definitely not going to see that anytime soon, because I haven't seen a Daytona 2 cabinet in forever. I still on occasion see a Daytona USA cabinet. I think that game definitely had more lasting power than Daytona 2, but as far as the sequel is concerned, it's everything you loved about Daytona, except the graphics are better, there's more interesting race courses, everything's just kind of dialed up to 11 compared to the original game. But taking a look at the first track here, it really is almost a one-to-one replica to Daytona USA. You were just basically participating in a NASCAR-style race with your stock cars. You have the oval, and you're turning in and out. As far as emulating this game is concerned, just like Scud Race, it is extremely easy to do on the Supermodel emulator. It takes the Model 3 games, and it runs perfectly on my PC. Absolutely no issues. There's really no graphical glitches. The sound is perfect. It runs at full speed. So really, if you want to play this game, you shouldn't have much issue whatsoever trying to get it run on your system. As far as the gameplay concerns, you're definitely your typical arcade racer. I mean, you're not going to get much depth into it. It's not a simulator whatsoever. But to sit down with a beer, have a good time with this game is extremely easy. And again, I just don't understand why Sega was so hesitant to port these over to the Dreamcast. Maybe it was something to do with the fact that they wanted to have all original new IPs on the system, but considering you could have easily had this as a launch game, just like Scud Race could have been, I don't know what Sega was thinking when they decided to never port this over. And to date, you can't play this on any other platform. It wasn't released for the PC, it wasn't released for another console, it hasn't been ported to modern systems. You either have to find an arcade cabinet, or you need to emulate this on your computer to be able to play it. And that just to me makes no sense whatsoever why Sega would leave a franchise as big as Daytona, the sequel to it, in arcades only. Because like I said, if you see one of these cabinets, definitely play it, because you're not going to get a chance otherwise unless you emulate it, and I think they're probably pretty rare at this point in time. Although honestly, Model 3 hardware, as far as I've been told and I've read, was relatively reliable. I mean, granted, getting this game hooked up as an arcade cabinet in your house would definitely be a feat, and if you just have the board and try to set up your own controls, you might not be successful, but hey, you can always try. And we finished in position 9, which is pretty good for the first race of the capture. And that was my first race out. It'd been years since I played this game in arcades. When I was thinking about games that I wanted to put on a playlist that didn't come out on home consoles, this definitely popped up too, because I always thought this would come to the Dreamcast. I think I'd even read rumors in like 99, 2000 that Sega was thinking about porting it, but that could just be my memory and reading magazines, and maybe just my childhood hope that they would do something like that. And now we're on to track 2 here, and we got this awesome swinging pirate ship. There's definitely a lot more going on in this than the original Daytona, although Daytona USA did still have some, side of road attractions to take a look at. But what I love about this game more than anything is just the overall sense of speed. Same thing with Scud Race. Everything moves at a perfect 60 frames a second, and the sense of speed and momentum is something that you just really don't get as much in arcade races, I feel like, since everything's kind of like more like the Forza Horizons or Forza in general, where things feel more realistic for sure, but you don't get that same sense of just like raw speed and raw thrill that you get in something like a 90s arcade racer. I would say that this feels similar to San Francisco Rush, except you don't really have any jumps, but as far as the handling is concerned and kind of just the bumper car racing aspect of it, it definitely feels kind of similar. I definitely put myself on the wall there. And I will say that I'm definitely not the best at arcade racing games. I do love them, and I love playing them, but even if I practice, there's just not the genre that I am great at. It's just one of those things, I've never been the best at them. But as far as Daytona is concerned here, I'm definitely better at it than Scud Race, because I at least finished a race. What I'm going to let you do is just listen to a little bit of the soundtrack, because it is great, and take a little bit look at some of the artwork that's going on, all those little visuals on the side. And I'll come back in just a moment here and kind of talk more about Daytona 2, but enjoy the soundtrack and the engine noises, because they are all awesome. So if you do want to play something similar to Daytona 2, Daytona USA 2001 did come out on the Dreamcast, and I don't understand what they were thinking with that one. It is a decent game, but it's basically a graphical overhaul and remake of the original Daytona USA with all the courses involved. But I played that before, and weirdly, the steering feels completely different than playing the original Daytona USA. So while it's a decent game, it's not one that I highly recommend. And like I said, I don't know if maybe just the original Daytona was more popular and Sega thought that they'd be able to sell more units of Daytona USA if they revamped it for the Dreamcast versus Daytona 2, which you're looking at here. Really, I mean, who knows? Like I said, video game magazines in the late 90s and early 2000s kept talking about a rumored port of this game coming to Dreamcast, but it just never came to fruition, which is definitely a big disappointment. So one of the interesting mechanics that wasn't in the original Daytona USA that they haven't brought to Daytona 2 is kind of like a drafting or slingshot mechanic. If you drive behind a car, you're going to get a little bit of a slipstream. You're able to use that as a little bit of a boost to go around other vehicles. It's kind of sort of similar to drifting in Mario Kart, except you don't really get any visual indicator. But if you do perform and take a line in the correct manner, you can kind of slingshot around your opponents and get a little bit of a speed boost compared to what your car's top speed normally would be. I definitely just duffed it into the wall there. I will say the game controls really well, but I do have some issues with it just because I don't know if it's the emulator and my Xbox One controller I was using, but sometimes the analog stick can be a little bit more sensitive than I feel like it should be, but that could just come down to the overall emulation experience. But as far as the Model 3 emulator Supermodel is concerned, as you can see when we've been playing this, it looks like it's a PC release. There's nothing about this that looks like emulation. All the graphics look amazing. The sound emulation is perfect. So as far as emulation accuracy, I don't have a Daytona 2 cabinet next to me to compare it to, but it is so close that it's really not going to be much of an issue playing it. But the fact that we actually have to emulate it in the first place is what really confuses me about Sega's decision-making process in the 90s and the early 2000s. I mean, I get it, you only had so many developers, you only had so many studios, you couldn't port every single thing over to the Dreamcast, but the fact that they left some of their biggest arcade hits in the arcade just doesn't make any sense. Now, they had some great games and unique games like Space Channel 5, which were a lot of fun, but it's really funny to me that they decided to make those games over putting teams on ports for things like Daytona 2, because I feel like that would have been a bigger seller, even though Space Channel 5 is an awesome game. Or you have things like Seaman. They're really interesting experiences, and they kind of lend themselves to the quirky reputation of Dreamcast, but would I trade Seaman in for Daytona 2 on the Dreamcast? I think I would, because while Seaman is a fun game, Daytona USA is that much more fun and something that I think would have moved a lot more copies. But that's kind of hindsight being 2020. You can never really say what would have been successful had they done it. And now we're on to the fourth course here, which is the longest course, and it combines all four of the courses into one long stretch. Kind of almost has like an outrun feel to it, where you just continue to drive through the scenery. You have this horror element here after the pirate ship, this amusement park, and then everything just basically continues on. So it's going to be the hardest course in the game. It's also going to be the longest, and it's really going to test your skill. As you can see there, my skill was not up to par when I threw it right into the wall and spun out, which is my fault. But really, I love this game. I highly recommend you download it, you emulate it, you check it out. You kind of get some two-player going on this. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but you can kind of emulate network cabinets up so you could play with a friend in your living room and really have a great time. But if you do see it in an arcade, definitely throw a few quarters into it, because you're lucky if you see it and you may never see it again. And that's the thing about this franchise in general, is I wish Sega would just touch it more. We could have another Daytona. You could have a VR Daytona. You could have anything in this franchise, and I think people would really still be interested in playing it, because when you talk about famous Sega franchises, of course you're going to say Sonic first, maybe House of the Dead after that, but Daytona's probably going to be a strong third as far as things Sega is known for. Maybe Golden Axe would be fourth. You could debate me on what the list would be, but point being is that Daytona is still a really popular franchise, and it's something that I think Sega should come back around to and release maybe a new arcade cabinet. That'd be awesome. I mean, they did a cabinet for Scarlet Dawn, obviously, but something that you could play in-home, even if it is just a downloadable title for $20. I think there's definitely a market out there for people that want to play Daytona 2 and just Daytona in general. But short of that, that is Daytona 2. Hope you guys enjoyed watching it, and definitely recommend you download and play it. It's a great game. But otherwise, we will be back on Tuesday with an episode in our mainline entry series, and then we will be back on Friday as well. But we'll be back Sunday with another episode of the Unported playlist. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you can do us a huge favor, go down below and hit like and subscribe. It takes us a lot of time to make all these episodes, and I'm currently recording this while staying at home due to the coronavirus epidemic, so it's been even harder to get these captures done and recorded with everybody in the house. Short of that, we hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you next time. Enjoy the rest of the racing. Bye-bye.